and to fulfill our obligations in the community of nations. Give grace to your servants, Lord. And finally, teach our people to rely on your strength, to accept their responsibilities to their fellow citizens. They may elect trustworthy leaders and make wise decisions for the well-being of our society. We may serve you faithfully in our generation and honor your holy name. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. This sitting is now in session.
Announcements by Your Honor. Messages from Her Excellency the President. Petitions. Papers. Government notices. Private members' notices. Notices of questions. Report from select committees. First reading of bills. Statements by ministers. Congratulatory. Let me just come back to that. Statements by ministers. Congratulatory annual victory speeches. Personal explanations. Motions for leave of absence. Or replies to questions. Notice of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. Announcements by Your Honor. Reverted to minutes.
Minutes of the 16th of July, 2004. Be deferred. Honorable Member for St.
Thank you,
Michael's.
Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the minutes for July the 16th, 2024 be deferred. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Orders of the day, ma'am.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that those standing orders be deferred. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Honorable member. Government's business is the instant order of the day. Remember?
Madam Deputy Speaker, order number 8. Order number 8, in the name of the Honorable Attorney General, to move the second reading of the Health Services Amendment Bill 2024.
Member for Joseph.
Madam Deputy Speaker, today is a day that I think we have anticipated on many occasions. And while certain kinds of legislation does not normally emanate or does not normally reach the chamber in the name of the Attorney General, I have absolutely no difficulty being the vessel through which this legislation comes today. I don't propose to be overly long, but I think that it is important to set the statutory context in which this legislation is coming, and then the consequential issues that arise as a result of this legislation being here. This is an amendment bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, and therefore it is not an unwise thing to look really at the substance of the original legislation which it proposes to amend. Madam Deputy Speaker, before I delve into that, though, let me share with you a memory of mine, which I suspect is a memory that most of us will have, or perhaps two memories. Growing up as a child in St. George, we used to look forward to the mobile cinema. I think there are probably not many members of the chamber who will recollect this, though all must have heard about it. And as a child, Madam Deputy Speaker, we used to walk from where we lived in Lower Estate all up the way to the pasture in front of St. George's Boys' School. This is up beside the parish church. And we would walk up there in the late evening with benches, the traditional Barbadian bench. We didn't have any nice folding chairs. And as a child, my interest was in Bud and Lou. I think that was probably the most common feature that you used to see. Occasionally there was a movie. It was all in black and white. And I really had the idea in my head that the mobile cinema was purely about entertaining villagers. It only came to me later, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, sorry. It only came to me later that the mobile cinema being done by the government was really intended to deliver to the rural Barbadians, especially, a series of, I don't want to call it infomercials, but they had other videos on healthcare. They had other videos on getting rid of mosquitoes and so on. I only realized many years later that the purpose of it was not about the entertainment at all. The entertainment was to get you there so that when you were there, you were the recipient of knowledge, how to get rid of the mosquitoes, health care, nutrition, and things of that sort. It was a Barbados that is past, but one that I and perhaps you, Madam Deputy Speaker, will recollect with some fondness. The other memory of mine that I want to share with the Chamber is being home and seeing generally men walking around with a glistening bronze spray can. It wasn't very big, but I believe that these guys used to take so much pride in their spray can, they probably used to polish it with brasso, the way cadets used to polish. Well, it looked like bronze to me. But if you say it's copper, I will accept. I don't remember whose word it was copper, but it was glistening, Madam Deputy Speaker. I believe you would recall that as well. I feel to polish it with brasso. And I was always curious, because I was a little boy, I was curious, what is this for? And they would come around and they would spray. I came to discover that they were doing periodic visits in various communities to spray to get rid of the Aedes aegypti mosquito and so on. Madam Deputy Speaker, Barbados has changed significantly since then. And there are many who will say that in some respects we have changed for the worse. There are many who would say that even though we have social media, we have TV, you no longer need to walk a mile to go to receive some knowledge about something. But yet still, we have a Barbados that in some respects has either forgotten the fundamentals or chosen to ignore those fundamentals. For just about 2 years now, going into 3, this administration has had its own outreach to the public, not mobile cinema this time, but through our initiative that we call Parish Speaks. And Parish Speaks, for those of you who have not participated in them, are occasions where individuals, residents of parishes are able to come out and engage with the Prime Minister and the members of her cabinet on matters of general concern to individuals in the parish. And I believe that St. Thomas is probably the one that has the largest attendance, second probably to St. Andrew. And we discuss, as you're well aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, a wide range of things, but there is something that always comes up. There's hardly been a Parish Speaks where some individual has not taken the microphone and expressed a serious grievance about the condition of lands, house spots generally, in their communities. Now, as we drive by in our air-conditioned cars and we zip past, we probably just treat it as a little bit more greenery on the landscape. But when we canvass, as we do, and we're walking, we see it a little more closely. And what zips by as we drive doesn't zip by as we walk. And we realize then that we are looking at overgrown lots of land. People have been crying out for a solution to dealing with overgrown lots of land. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can't speak from an environmental perspective. I can't speak from a health perspective, but I can try to speak from a legal perspective. The first thing that I want to point out is that the Health Services Act has probably 20 or 30 regulations that are published under that legislation. One of those legislative instruments, one of those regulations, became law in 1969. And that regulation is called the Health Services Nuisance Regulation. That is not, of course, the only one. There are many others. There's Health Services collection of refuse, there's Health Services building regulations, a number of regulations under the Health Services Act, all intended to direct Barbadians in terms of how we do our business, how we carry out our activity, how we operate, what are the minimum standards that we have to operate by so that our society can be enjoyed by all. Happily, we have the benefit of education. As I said, we have access to so many other media now that a lot of these things, and as we've developed, a lot of these things are almost taken as of course, as a matter of course. But there are still individuals for whom dumping, the unlawful discard of refuse, whether it is coconut shells, cans, bottles, whatever it is par for the course. There are individuals who pay no regard to the condition of their property, whether it is occupied or not. And you will find that bush and grass and weeds and so on grow to, in some instances, spectacular heights. Perhaps less common in St. Michael, but in constituencies like yours and mine, Madam Deputy Speaker, where there's hardly a day that goes by that the rain does not fall. So something that happens in St. Michael and may take 6 weeks to happen will probably happen in 3 weeks in St. Joseph or St. Thomas. The grass, the bush, the weeds will grow at such a phenomenal rate. I will leave it to other better educated members of this chamber to talk about the deleterious effects of those things. Mindful, of course, that there's a purpose that vegetation serves, whether it is planned, groomed, or not. Madam Deputy Speaker, this call for a clean Barbados is not new. As I said, the Health Services Regulation has been in place since 1969. But there were some issues in relation to the law, the act, and that's what we're debating today. There were some areas that we felt we needed to improve on and tighten up. And then we wanted to take the opportunity to, in some ways, modernize and make those regulations more relevant. As I said, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would begin by looking at some of the context. Now, our Health Services Act was passed in 1969 and came into force on the 1st of September 1969. And it sets out laws relating to the promotion and preservation of the health and inhabitants of Barbados. The promotion and preservation of the health of the inhabitants of Barbados. In those days, and currently, if you breach the health services regulations by creating a nuisance, the standard practice would be for you to be dragged before the magistrate's court by way of penalty and punishment. Has it been effective? The simple answer is no. The level of fines have been small, set at a level that was sensible in 1969, but that is not of particular relevance or particular deterrence in the year 2024. But also, the mechanisms surrounding how that legislation worked back then worked, but are not relevant for today. So what am I speaking about? Well, for example, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the legislation, as it stands, it is provided at 11A that where a property is in a dangerous state or is injurious to the health of human beings, animals, or plants, the minister may take possession of such property and execute such work as is reasonably necessary. And after the expiration of 42 days, the minister may direct that the property be sold by public auction for the recovery of debts due to the crown in respect of any work so executed. So that's what you were looking at. You breach the regulations, you can either be carried before the court, or the Minister of Health, or the minister responsible, can execute the works, whatever those works are, but the only mechanism for recovering the money for those works was to sell the property under public auction. Now, that has the potential, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be a most draconian remedy. Because you see, the cost of executing, let's say, a cleanup, and perhaps the minister responsible for sanitation might be able to give an idea, but the cost associated with the cleanup of a property might come to $1,000. It might come to $300 if you do it yourself. It may come to $2,000. Is it reasonable for the minister to sell your entire property to recover what really is a relatively modest sum? Hardly the case. Hardly the case. So we recognize that while this was the law, and certainly made some kind of sense back then, we needed to find another mechanism to allow the state, where necessary, to do the cleanup and to recover the funds. This amendment brings that to the table today. We also recognized that the method of dragging people before the magistrate's court to face a criminal penalty was also archaic. It served to criminalize Barbadians for breaches that are administrative, breaches that arise because of a failing to do a particular thing, and not for a positive action to do wrong. The lawyers would well recollect, when they all studied criminal law in first year, the concept of a mens rea. You must have an intention to do a particular act. I hardly think that is a person whose property falls into a state of being overgrown. It's somebody who says, I intend to cause this. For the most part, it is a failure. It is a neglect. But the way in which the law currently treats it, you're required to drag an individual before the court so that they can be prosecuted for a criminal wrong and be made to face a penalty under the court. Now, and you will end up with a criminal record. This is not the kind of Barbados that we want today, and in fact, I will reiterate that this administration's position is that there are a whole host of breaches in our law, in many of our statutes, for which we are simply not prepared to follow the old tradition of dragging people before the courts to be prosecuted. Those are not people who are criminals. Save the prosecution of individuals for people with a criminal intent. I have constituents, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think anybody could say that they don't. Where there's a little old lady or a little old man who's struggling to get by on a pension, and they simply can't afford to keep up the property as they would like. And in those circumstances, what are you going to do? You're going to drag Mr. Jones before the court and make him go through a criminal trial? Those things, that is not the approach of this administration. So the approach that we're taking now is to put an administrative fine in place, an administrative penalty, so that if you breach, you have to pay the penalty. But as a punishment for failing to remedy your breach, you have to pay a continuing daily penalty if you don't remedy it. What before, criminalized. You're dragged before the court and prosecuted. Today, an administrative penalty will be imposed, and the penalty will attract a daily accretion, in this case of an additional $10 a day, so that you will still feel the sanction of the state, but without the indignity and the oppressiveness of being declared to be a criminal. Now, what does the amendment provide for? The Amendment Act provides, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I think we can go to the most important ones. The amendment of Section 11A. Section 11A is the one which says that the minister can sell the property by auction to recover the cost of executing the works. What we have here is that where costs are incurred in the execution of work on property, then the cost of that work is added to your land tax bill. It becomes a charge on your land, and it is recoverable in the same way that land tax is going to be recovered. And let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, at this time, discussions have already been had with the Ministry of Finance, and they have been asked to deal with the BRA, so that in an instance where John Brown or whoever the person is has a civil penalty imposed on them, or where the state steps in and cleans up their property, their land tax bill will now have an added portion dealing with the cost of the cleanup. So you know what it is that comes in on your land tax bill. It is subject to the same penalties and interest as your land tax. We feel that that is a much fairer system than selling somebody's house and land to recover $500 or $600 for cleaning up a lot. No, I don't know. Maybe you can clean up a lot for $500 or $600, but I'm sure it isn't going to be $30,000 or $40,000. You may have somebody with a piece of land valued at $120,000, and you send in a swipe or a bobcat to cut it down. $1,500. The thought of selling out that person's land to recover that cost is hardly something that we could do in all good conscience. So this approach, where it is added to your land tax and recoverable as if it was land tax, is one that we feel is more appropriate. But we also have here a mechanism where individuals, if they consider that there's a hardship caused to them, the individual can apply to the relief board, and in the schedule, the relief board is defined as, in fact, not in the schedule, in the definition section, the relief board means the Land Taxation Relief Board established by the Land Tax Act. So you can apply to the relief board for relief. Think of a case, Madam Deputy Speaker, where an individual has a parcel of land and people keep dumping on it. The landowner is hardly at fault, but because people are dumping on it, it would be fair to say that that land and the state of that land represents a nuisance and a risk to the public. And the state would have to come in and do the cleanup, and the cost of the cleanup would be added to the person's land tax bill. But the individual is entitled to go to the relief board and say, I understand the rationale behind this, but the cause of this breach, the cause of this nuisance, was not due to anything that I did. I took all the measures possible to try to ensure that it couldn't happen, but I have people who are dumping on my land. That is a perfect case to make an application to the relief board so as to say, I need you to remit these amounts that have been added to my land tax bill so that I can, and that is the responsibility of a fair government. But in addition to the cost of the works, the administrative penalty that you would be charged is also added to your land tax bill if you don't pay it, and recovered in the same way. Now, I'm going to come to the regulation shortly, but I want you to work through the scenario with me. An individual whose land is in an unkept state such that it is injurious to health. Let us think perhaps of somebody who has old vehicles on the land. And we walk around and we see them. Sometimes the old vehicle that you always had planned to fix, but you never got the money to fix it, and it stays there. I can think of many of them. And then, of course, the individuals are village mechanics who will collect car bodies for parts or plan to fix it. Somebody bring this car to fix, but never come back for it. Never bring the money, all that kind of stuff. Those situations, the health people will say that they create a harborage for pests such as mosquitoes. They create a harborage for mice and rats and other, I suppose you could say, vermin. That state of affairs represents a health concern, a health risk, not just for the occupiers of those lands, but also for residents or communities. In such a state, the health inspector will visit, and if your premises do not meet the required standard, they will serve you with a notice. Different breaches of the nuisance regulations will require different lengths of time to clear up. So you will get a notice requiring you to do the work, and that notice can be as much as, but no more than 21 days. So you're given a notice saying your property is harboring mice and rats because you have these old vehicles. You're required to remove the vehicles and to clean the property. And the health inspector then leaves you to do what you're required to do. But when the health inspector circles back at the end of that 21 days and you have not effected the work, it is then that the civil penalty, the administrative penalty will be imposed on you. So you've been given a notice drawing your attention to the problem, drawing your attention to the specific actions that you need to take. If you do not take them, then you're served with a notice saying you have to pay the administrative penalty of $300. Now let me say, all properties, whether it's residential, vacant land, commercial, we've set that rate at $300. But if after the notice has expired and you've not cleaned it up and the breach continues, then you will attract a daily penalty of $10. So for the breach, if you fail to clean it up, an administrative penalty of $300. I repeat, doesn't matter if you're a commercial property, a residential property, or a piece of unzoned land, if there's such a thing. The administrative penalty for failing to correct the breach is $300. When the health inspector come back and is still in that state, then you attract a daily penalty of $10 until such time as you clean it up, or in a really bad case, the state will clean it up. Now let me say this, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is not the state wanting to take on the burden of cleaning up anybody's land. Let me make that clear. This is, the state will step in as a last resort. And when the state steps in as a last resort, it is stepping in not to do it for you, it is stepping in to do it for the safety and the promotion of health of the community. That's when the state will act. So somebody whose land is in a bad state, don't feel that you can pick up the phone and call the ministry and say, oh Lord, I got some old cars here, I want somebody move them for me. Or I got a lot of bush here, I want somebody come and cut it. The state will step in as a last resort. The obligation is for the owner or occupier, because you'll appreciate the two are not the same. You have sometimes family land, title is in a mess, so on. There's no clear owner, but the property is in the occupation of individuals, so it is owner or occupier. So the obligation is yours to clean up your land. Get that straight. The obligation is yours to clean up your land. That is why there's a penalty that is going to be imposed. That is why there's a daily penalty that is going to be added. But the state has an obligation to safeguard the health of the community, and as a last resort, the state will step in and act. But because we incur that burden, cleaning up somebody else's property, is for that reason that it is important for us to be able to recover those taxpayers' dollars in the method that we've worked out here. Mr. Speaker, there's an appellate process as well for the administrative penalty. Again, there's circumstances where an individual may want to say, the imposition of this administrative penalty is unfair. So perhaps the health inspector say, I give you 2 days to clean it here. And come back and slap on a penalty of $300. When in fact, it is the kind of thing that might actually take the full 21 days. One doesn't know. There may be a case again where it isn't the fault of the individual who is in occupation or who owns it. There are any number of circumstances, and that is where the relief board comes in. An individual can say, I need to get relief from this administrative penalty, so these arrangements are put in place. Now, Mr. Speaker, this is not unusual. There's a reason why we were able to say, instead of setting up a new tribunal, let's go to the Land Tax Relief Board, because the Land Tax Relief Board already exists in law for the purpose of dealing with issues relating to land tax. They have a wealth of knowledge and understanding because they deal with those things every day. And we felt, in as much as you're dealing with land and the condition of land, it would make sense to go back to the Land Tax Relief Board and have that relief board mediate in matters of this sort. But also in relation to the garbage and sewage tax. There's a garbage and sewage tax that is added to your water bill, but there is provision for individuals to apply for relief. So you will find that there's a common thread across many of the mechanisms that government puts in place, and that common thread is that there must always be an opportunity to make sure that any hardship that may be caused to individuals is mitigated. And I think this is important. Now, Mr. Speaker, a lady very kindly sent me an email, I think after a recent Parish Speaks. And the email said, Dear sir, I'm sending you my land tax reference number. Can you please arrange to have the bush on my land card? I have to admit that while I like to respond to emails fairly quickly, I'm still not sure how to respond to that one. I will respond to it in due course, but I'm still not sure how to respond to it in a way that would be required of a minister of the state. Because on the one hand, I have to admit that I felt some little annoyance. On the other hand, I also felt the need to laugh. There is always going to be an opportunity or a reason for the state to intervene in hardship cases. That's what the government is there for. But the notion that individuals will just write and say, here's my land tax reference number, could you please arrange for somebody to come and clean up my land? And this person is not from St. Joseph, because if they were, then I would say, well, as a constituency matter, I would have an interest. But this person is from another parish altogether and thought that they would ask me, because of our move to deal with this situation, they thought they would ask me if I would be so good as to assist. Sir, Sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me next turn to the matter of the specific regulations that we're going to be putting in place. I want to signal, though, to the chamber at this point that it is the intention that this matter will go to select committee, standing select committee, because we feel that on all transformational matters, the people of Barbados need to have an opportunity to come and have their voices heard, whether that is to have your voice heard on the substance, on the context, on any other matter in relation to it. We feel that consultation with Barbadians is best. This matter has been pending for quite some time, and I can see no good reason why Barbadians should not have an opportunity to address it before the committee. But before I get to that, to the regulations themselves, let me talk about another element that is of some significance. The matter of coverage. Whatever we say about the condition of lots, the harborage of vermin and things of that sort, coverage has been a serious concern all across Barbados. It is a seasonal concern because there are certain times of year when the pods will burst, but it is a serious concern. And there was some significant discussion, Madam Deputy Speaker, about whether or not we should not include a prohibition or having coverage on your land as a nuisance. And we thought about it long and hard. As a result of a close examination into the issue, we had a meeting with the farming community, because the truth is, the prevalence of coverage is largely on agricultural holdings. And we had a meeting with the farming community. And we said to them, look, we want to outlaw, we want to completely prohibit coverage on lands, and mindful that it is prevalent on agricultural lands, we felt it was important to convene a meeting with these interest groups to try to let them know what we were thinking and to come up with a way of getting it done. There are a couple of things that I really would like to consider to be eye-openers. I did not know, for example, that it is virtually impossible to destroy covet seeds. As a result of that particular meeting with the farming community, they said a couple of things. First of all, in the years when Barbados was heavily under sugar agriculture, you hardly had a problem with coverage because lands were hardly left idle. The cane used to be planted everywhere, and then not cane, you had yams, sweet potatoes, whatever else it is. And therefore, coverage was not the problem that it is today. In order to address the coverage difficulty, it would require the hiring of large numbers of individuals to be able to go physically into these areas to remove coverage. Now, there are things like drones and there are pesticides and so on that can be used, but these are not cost-effective. Well, they're certainly not cheap solutions. But even if you did that, the farming community, buttressed by the specialists in the Ministry of Agriculture, pointed out that the eradication of coverage is not a one-year thing. It is something that has to be constantly done. In fact, the scientists in the Ministry of Agriculture said, AG, it is virtually impossible to eradicate coverage. The best that we can do is to try to manage coverage. Now, that is not a thing that comes lightly to me or any of us, because we feel that you should be able to eradicate just about anything. Eradicate the African snail, eradicate love vine, you just, eradicate. But in the state of nature, there are some things that you just can't eradicate. And therefore, we have to focus on management rather than eradication. They have said that there'll be approximately 7 years of cowitch seeds in the ground at any given time. 7 years of cowitch seeds. So that when cowitch germinates and grows, and you come and you cut that down and you think that you've solved the problem, there's 6 more years of seeds in the ground waiting behind you. They've also informed us that one of the challenges they have is the mechanical harvesting. Because the mechanical harvesters that harvest the sugarcane, when they blow out, and I'm trying to describe something that I'm not intimately familiar with, but when they blow out the shaft, thank you very much, cowitch seeds are often in the shafts, and they will travel on the wind and sometimes reach miles down the road. So they've indicated that in the manual system of cutting cane, you didn't have this problem, but when you're harvesting now mechanically, then you do have that situation to contend with. So the cowitch seeds will travel quite some distance. So it became evident that to impose a burden on farmlands to eradicate cowitch was one that would be counterproductive. The cost of so doing would make any farming that they do unprofitable. And then if we are not going to be able to impose it on the farms, then as a government we have to ask ourselves, is it fair to impose it on residential owners? And I think the simple answer to that question is no. And therefore, the Ministry of Agriculture has agreed to establish a cowitch management program for all of Barbados, which will hopefully see the threat and the danger of cowitch reduced to a manageable level. Again, predicated on the basis that it is impossible to eradicate cowitch. Having said that, then, let us look at the regulations. Now, I reiterate that the bill will be going to Standing Select Committee. Because the bill is giving rise to a new regulatory framework, that regulatory framework, and therefore these regulations, will also go before the committee for public dialogue. Now, let me tell you about the actual regulations. Now, it's important to point out that Barbados in 1969 was a very different Barbados. Let me give you, for example, a few of the regulations that existed, that exist currently and that have existed since 1969. Under the Health Services Regulations 1969, there's a provision that the following constitutes a nuisance. Any house, building, or part of a house or building which is overcrowded contrary to any enactment. Now, I am young, but I'm still old enough to remember Barbados growing up in the 60s, where because of the size of people's families, because of the absence of resources, because of the size of the houses, you did have a situation where there were lots of overcrowded houses. In addition to that, in the urban areas, you had a lot of people renting rooms. Sometimes you had a whole family in a room. The former member for the city of Bridgetown, Billy Miller, often regaled the parliamentary group of stories where you had individuals coming in to work, often in the sugar industry, and they were crowded into vast areas. You would also remember the commission of inquiry that took place into the 1937 arrest that spoke about living conditions in Barbados, at that time. There was a time in Barbados when overcrowding was of such a nature that the law had to make provision for it. Now, happily, I'm not suggesting that there aren't still some overcrowded homes, but we didn't feel that it was necessary to replicate this kind of provision today. So under that legislation, there were about 17 nuisances. Under those regulations, there were about 17 nuisances. And when we looked at them, we found that many of them could be simplified and combined today without losing the impact of the legislation. And therefore, having modernized them, we've now come up with just about 10 or 11 nuisances expressed in relatively modern language. But there are some things that still remain. So, for example, under the existing regulation, there is a reference to the following being a nuisance. Any place, matter, thing, deposit, or accumulation of liquid or solid matter that is full, in such a state or so placed, made or left as to be insanitary, injurious, or dangerous to health, or likely to become so. That is the current law, and we're keeping it because it makes sense. Also, the existence of flies, mosquitoes, or other insects capable of transmitting or causing disease, we're keeping that. Bed bugs, cockroaches, or other vermin, we're keeping that. Mice and rats, we're keeping that. So we're not getting rid of the fundamentals, we're keeping many of these things. But we are adding. So one of the things that we are adding is that to have on your property any grass, bush, or weeds which are more than 2 feet in height is now a nuisance, or will be a nuisance when these regulations are passed. Now, there's been substantial debate as to whether 2 feet is tall enough. Some of us feel that we could probably settle on a shorter height. Others want a longer height. We've tried to accommodate the interests of most, taking into account, as I said, places like St. Joseph and St. Thomas and parts of St. George where we get rain all the time. So we're maintaining, we're now inserting a provision which provides that any grass, bush, or weeds more than 2 feet in height will be a nuisance. So these regulations are going to be available for public scrutiny and discussion, but we're maintaining this is a nuisance too, the presence of empty bottles, broken or otherwise, empty tins, coconut shells, uncovered barrels, boxes, or anything which may serve as a receptacle for water or which creates a breeding place for mosquitoes. These are all common sense things. And therefore, even though we are modernizing the law, we are keeping the fundamentals in place. But we are adding, Madam Deputy Speaker, a new provision in relation to derelict buildings. There are in Barbados a large number of derelict buildings dotted across our landscape that, because of their condition, they're dangerous to individuals. Now, it's not just that they can be a harborage for vermin, mosquitoes, and so on, but because of their very condition. There was a very well-publicized news story about 16 or so months ago, where an individual was walking down through the street and a piece of a building fell off and struck the individual. So there's now going to be provision in relation to derelict buildings, that these will be a nuisance. But again, you can apply to the relief board, and if your situation is one of hardship. Now, let me make it clear that we've provided that this regulation will bind the state. The state is perhaps the largest landowner in the country. It is perhaps the largest owner of buildings in the country. And it can be no secret, Madam Deputy Speaker, that as you move around Barbados, you will see buildings that are owned by the state that have fallen into a state of dereliction. They're overgrown with bush. There are locations where people dump stuff, and on and on. We recognize that government cannot ask people to meet a particular standard if the government is not itself willing to meet that standard. Now, it will represent an additional financial burden on the state, but we cannot be unfair. We cannot say to an individual, you have to keep your house spot clean. Otherwise, we're going to fine you. And we're going to add the money to your land tax. But right next door to you is an old government building that has fallen to pieces full of bush. Is that not also a harborage for mosquitoes, rats, mice, and other vermin? We can't have two standards. So if we're going to insist that the individual keep their property clean, the government that owns a parcel of land right next to you, whether that is a residential spot in Wanstead, because years ago the government used to own houses in Wanstead for public servants, or it might be a derelict residence, and there are some other derelict residences owned by the government in Pine Gardens and all kinds of other places, old schools. In a recent discussion, I think there's an old community center coming down the someplace near opposite Divvy, in a bad shape. The old skills training building, I'm told. So we cannot expect the average Barbadian to meet a particular standard in relation to promoting community health and benefits by clearing their lots, by keeping them clean, while the state is given a blight. I know Hansard is probably going to be trying to figure out how to spell blight, so let me solve their problem and say, well, the state is giving a free pass in relation to its own lands. And I think that is a principal position that Barbadians would appreciate and would support. It will cost us. It will cost us, but perhaps the solution is to be proactive and make sure that our properties don't fall into a state of dereliction. There was a time when the old public baths were, when once the need for community baths, I don't want to age anybody, but I know those days too, when, that's where you used to go and get your morning shower. That's what you had to do. And over time, when they fell into a state of disuse, some of them were allowed to deteriorate. I'm happy to say that over the years, many Barbadians applied to buy them. Many of them have been sold. Perhaps that is the direction that we have to look in, where there are properties that are perhaps capable of going to the open market. We could consider that, but that's perhaps a discussion for another day. The point is that we can no longer sit back and allow government buildings to fall into such a state of disrepair that they present health challenges for Barbadians. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to wrap up. I think I've probably labored in this vineyard probably longer than I needed to. The key takeaways, I believe, are these. The existing arrangements are draconian when it comes to recovering the cost of doing work on lands. We are changing that to provide that you can, the cost will be added to your land taxes and recoverable in the same way. So you get your land tax and you pay. If you don't pay, then penalties and interest are added to it. We think that is a much fairer system than selling out the whole property just to recover the costs. Secondly, there are opportunities to mitigate any hardship because we are going to be implementing a system of appealing to a relief board. Thirdly, instead of criminalizing people for failure to maintain their property in a particular condition, meeting a certain minimum standard, we're going to be imposing an administrative penalty, which will also be added to your land tax. So you will no longer have to go and stand up before a magistrate and say, how do you plead? I plead not guilty, and then go through a whole trial. It wastes everybody's time. The money it will take you to spend on a lawyer to fight one of those cases, you could have paid somebody to come and just take the place for yourself. The fourth takeaway is we're bringing new regulations. They're new. They represent really, in some instances, keeping the old but modifying in terms of the language, getting rid of some of the anachronistic concepts that we had, and also including new arrangements in relation to derelict buildings. The fifth thing is this act binds the state. So we're not having one law for the people and another law for the state. Everybody's going to be subject to the same law. But don't let's be foolish. Well, let me change that term. The state will not be imposing an administrative penalty on itself. The state doesn't get a land tax bill, so it can't add any cost of recovery onto the land tax bill. So there are certain practical matters that you have to accept. The state isn't going to sell its land to recover for itself the cost of cleaning it up. But the important thing is that the state is accepting that it will take on board the burden, the same burden that it is asking other Barbadians to take on board. And the final thing is that we are not, while it is almost instinctive to differentiate between owners of residential property and owners of commercial property, we felt that that was not a practical thing to do in today's media. If it becomes so, that is dealt with in the regulation, and we can always change it, but we feel it is better just to have a consistent approach, whatever the property is, just deal with it in the same place, because there are some commercial properties that are small. Somebody who has a snacker is a commercial property. So then you could find yourself trying to work out small business, medium-sized business, bigger-sized business. You find yourself trying to make a distinction that isn't really helpful in the pursuit of what we're trying to pursue. So we're saying all commercial buildings will have to face an administrative penalty, and also the daily charge, which can add up and is a fairly hefty amount over time. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope that this is not new. As I said, we've had health regulations since 1969, but there have been challenges with implementing it, and those challenges were based in how the act was conceived and enacted in 1969. So we've changed that, bringing a new approach and making it a little bit easier for the administrative arm of government to enforce its rules, while providing opportunities for Barbadians to feel that they have an obligation, but they're also getting a fair deal. I think this represents a good balance. I well remember when I did jurisprudence at Cave-Hill that one of the famous jurists talked about achieving ends with a minimum of friction and waste. And I'm satisfied, I think it was Pound, I'm satisfied that this measure, which, as I said, will go to select committee, takes us a fair way in that distance. What will be required of Barbadians? Keep your property clean. Keep your property clean. There are other provisions of the law which perhaps might be worthy of mentioning. Somebody asked about the cars alongside the road. Under the Highways Act, the Ministry of Public Works, I know that act is being reviewed, and we need to increase those penalties as well. But penalty or no penalty, under the Highways Act, the Ministry of Public Works has the power to move whatever it is blocking the roads. And I would really like to see the day coming, all these individuals who got the cars 3 and 4 and 5 line off alongside the road. The ambulance can't get in, the fire service can't get in, the garbage truck can't get in. Fine or not, I would love to see the days when that becomes a thing of the past. And to the extent that we have the power we should act and do it. Also, the Highways Act provides that anybody with land alongside the highway must keep it clear, must keep the verge clear so as not to obstruct the vision of any user of the road for a distance of 40 yards. These are things that are already the law, and we simply have to put more mechanisms in place for the enforcement. But above all, let us keep our properties in a condition that benefits not just ourselves, but that will promote the health and safety of our neighbors. Because after all, we are still our brother's keeper. I'm obliged to you. I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Honourable member for Christchurch West and opposition leader.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Good morning. Admittedly, I heard the opening of the speech that just ended while I was in my car. And when I first heard it, it was delivered in an impressive baritone. I don't know if the Honourable Attorney General of this country will now regard it as his finest hour, that he comes to this Parliament today to deliver with some eloquence on courage and mosquitoes, perhaps outdone only by his earlier intervention on noisy kites. Of course, I heard him yesterday threatening this country, I beg your pardon, promising this country that next week he will be a little more serious and will amend or introduce laws on bail in relation to more serious matters. But he is deserving of an ear even on these matters. And if these matters are not as earth-shattering as others, still we think that the Honourable Attorney General is deserving of an ear. I expect that the Honourable Member for St. Michael North will have something to say. Unless I have missed the news, I think he is still the Junior Minister of Health. The last time I heard him here was during the budget debate. So I trust that they will allow him to unburden himself today and say something about health. Because we heard within the last week one of the spokespersons for the Democratic Labour Party lament that the communications experts at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital seem to have replaced the ministers who are in the Ministry of Health. So this country is going to be extremely disappointed if they don't hear the Honourable Member for St. Michael North today. Add to these pearls of wisdom, he spoke of Bud and Lou. He's introducing this legislation, this amendment, and somehow Bud and Lou features in it, apart from the cowrick seeds. Then he goes to the parish speaks, and I trust that Your Honor would not have found it an embarrassment to you when he stated that the St. Thomas Parish Speaks and the St. Andrew Parish Speaks are the most successful. They're so well attended, and this country is supposed to forget that all those do, they seek to legitimize the pseudo-engagement, the pantomime, because there are not any genuine community engagement exercises. This country knows that those are pantomimes. well rehearsed by the members and the supporters of the government. And they travel around this country seeking to impress people that they're any more than what they are: pantomimes, pseudo-engagement. And no one is impressed. But I won't chastise him much longer, except to say with him what he said, that government, in seeking to penalize the citizens of this country, is itself one of the major offenders. It is now known that we visited, and this was not pseudo-engagement, we visited 6 Men's on Saturday. Six Men's in St. Peter. And we were told that the representative for that area had not seen it since 2018. Well, they said the election, and when we asked, you mean 2022? No, they said no, 2018. And if the honorable member for St. Peter were to stand in parts of 6 Men's, you would not see the top of his head. I bring news to this Parliament and to him today.
The honourable member, please.
The honourable member, I beg your pardon. And his too. And the honourable members too. That there are parts of that neighborhood called 6 Men's that when he revisits it, he will find that it stands in offense of what the Attorney General has done here today. I invite him to go down there today and see 6 Men's and the state of 6 Men's, so that when you have an Honourable Attorney General visiting a Parliament and speaking in these baritones and these serious baritones, the reality at the local level is that there's neglect. And so, as I said, I don't think he would want to now, that is the Honourable Attorney General, the member for St. Joseph, he will not now want to regard this as his finest hour, when the reality of what is happening in this country is disclosed to this government. And if he were heard to have said that government is an offender in relation to overgrown lots, we agree with him and add that government is a chief offender. But I want to inform this government and this Attorney General. You know, over the last week, we discovered that his favorite word is silly. Everything is silly. As I've said in here before, we lose the right to criticize this government. We lose that right. And every time you criticize it, oh, silly, silly, silly. What? How ironic, incidentally. Well, I am going to bring this Attorney General to a knowledge of what is happening in health in this country, beyond his interventions on mosquitoes and mice and cockroaches. I heard all this in the speech. And introduce him to the real problems that confront this country in terms of health delivery. Let us go to the Environmental Health Department. This government, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again, and if they're tired of hearing me saying it, prepare for the fatigue. This government has the most consultants ever in the history of this country. and the fewest environmental health inspectors ever in the history of this country. They are refusing, amidst these sweet baritones about mosquitoes and rats, amidst these sweet baritones, they are refusing, this government is refusing to augment that health department with an adequate number of health inspectors. Your Honor, you grew up in a time of the ubiquitous presence of the health inspector. They used to come around between, let's say, 9, 10 o'clock. We on holiday, we see them. White shirt, black pants, and they're walking up the road with the ladle. You remember what's a ladle, ma'am? The ladle.
I do. I'm so much older than you. I do.
No, you're not so much
I
older
still
than
have
I am.
memory.
I have told
But
you
thank
before
you
you're
for
more beautiful than
reminding
I
me.
am, but you're not much older. You're far, in fact, you're the best looking person in here presently.
Was that is not associated with the rodents and all that
No, no,
you're
no,
referring
indeed
to.
not. Indeed not.
Continue,
But,
sir. Continue, sir.
Your Honor, please ask this government, amidst the sweet baritones, to augment the public health department with an adequate number of officers and stop coming in here speaking sweetly when there are large problems that exist in health beneath those surfaces. But let us pause and thank those same officers for the sterling contribution that they made to this country during COVID. Now, Your Honor, as a matter of law, I have reservations as to the legality of a proposal to add to a land tax bill. A land tax imposition is specific. It is particular. It is a charge imposed by government when one owns land. It is called a land tax. And it is charged on the owner in relation to the value of that land. That is specific. That is specific legislation under the Constitution of this country, such as it is. Such as it is. And I say such as it is because going into 3 years now, we are still somewhere balancing between Westminster and republicanism, but that's another matter. My question is, can the government legally add to a land tax bill a charge imposed for remediation? A remediation charge is not a land tax, and you cannot arbitrarily add it to a land tax bill. There are two different species, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch West may find this of particular interest to him. It's not for me to disclose his private circumstances, but I suspect he will listen to this portion of the debate, and he will listen with some interest in spite of his partisan affiliations. That sometime in the afternoon he may well ask his lawyer if the state, if the government can legally transfigure or indeed conflate a remediation surcharge onto a land tax bill. There's a way to do things, and there's a proper way to do things. But whenever you criticize the government, man, you're the worst thing in the world. They call you all kinds of names. They tell you you're silly. Your Honor, I'm not going to repeat all the names. But I can understand a government being resistant. I've said this already, and I'm going to say it again because they need to understand it. I am here in the opposition, and I will give constructive opposition. And when I begin to criticize, I will do that constructively. And I will do that with an awareness and an acceptance that the government is entitled to resist the criticism. But what the government must not do and must never appear to be doing in this public domain, the government must never appear to be intolerant to criticism. I have given them that advice before. It is that intolerance that will not do this government's image any public good. There's a place in this country for an opposition. There's a role in this parliament for an opposition. And if this government now takes the position that I must come in here and applaud them, I intend to disappoint them. And where there is reason to criticize, I will do it. And this amendment today is due some criticism. I asked this government, I asked this Attorney General to go back to his legal advisors. And presumably he came to this parliament having been advised. Well, there's nothing wrong with a second bit of advice. And to ask them whether they are comfortable and whether he should be comfortable, he being the Honourable Attorney General, whether this government should be comfortable with attaching, that's the best word I could find, with attaching a remediation surcharge on a land tax bill. Simple. You know, a matter only becomes law in basically two circumstances. When this parliament passes it, and if it goes to the court, if the court interprets and says what is the law. So ultimately, the law comes into being only when a court says that it is the law. And even then it has to go through the appellate stages. So that the Honourable Member for St. Joseph is entitled to an opinion, and he will not, the Honourable Member, I beg your pardon, will not deny me the right to express a legal opinion, but that's all it is. At this stage, all we are debating are legal opinions. And so I asked the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, in a very civil way, please return and seek clarification. If not, for my sake, for the sake of the gentleman who sits to his right, as a landowner of some, I'm sorry to be disclosing his private wealth. But he will be concerned in his private capacity. And there's no harm in disclosing these things, Honourable Member for Christchurch West. Everybody knows that you're not like the rest of us. In terms of those matters, of course. But he's a decent man. And in that sense, he is like the rest of us, known to be a decent man. And I can say that publicly. I can say that publicly. The Honourable Member for Christchurch West is a decent man, as well as being a wealthy man. But that is not the subject of my story today. Yes. I'll leave him alone. He's blushing. Back to the bill that is before the Parliament. So that I have been inviting the government to revisit the proposal, the legislative proposal, and to give some fresh consideration to its passage. And since the Honourable Member for St. Michael North is present, muted as he is, over the past 3 months, I will ask through you, Your Honour, of him to try to find out a few things that are occurring within his ministry. And I will ask, through you, ma'am, for him to revisit those several departments in the Ministry of Health and to discover why the people who work in those departments are so unhappy. All is not well with health in this country. Now, the clearest evidence of that, Your Honor, was disclosed during the estimates debate. The second most powerful man in this government came in here during the estimates and said that the QEH is the worst it ever has been. And if perhaps we thought it was self-serving when he said it was at its peak when he used to work there. So having boasted that it was at its peak when he used to work there, he was impliedly conceding that it is now at its worst. And the Honourable Member for St. Michael North is duty-bound to explain to us whether his senior minister was telling the truth. The most explicit form of suffering, Your Honor, is when one is ill. That's the most explicit form of suffering. You don't get a more explicit form of suffering than ill health, and it visits all of us at some point in time. And sometimes it is physical, sometimes it is mental, and sometimes psychological. And if death is the greatest leveler, certainly ill health must be the second greatest of the levelers. We all get ill. And we are aware that for the extent of Barbados' history as an independent country, the emphasis, government's emphasis, or the emphases of governments have always been on two services, education and health. And the good reason is that unless a country, unless a government, unless the state invests heavily in health and education, it cannot claim to govern a country that is democratic nor just. And that's why governments have tended to make substantial investment in health and education. Today we're dealing with health. Education is not doing well either. In fact, education is very sick. So that all governments have made substantial investments in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. We are on the subject of health today, ma'am. I want to elevate this discussion beyond cowitch and mosquitoes. I want to elevate this discussion to those two. You have to leave off the S, though. You have to leave off the S. Ma'am, would you protect me, please?
Here to
Thank you very much.
you and everyone.
So that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital deserves better treatment. I want to accuse the government of having, in the last few years, in its thrust to invite investment into Barbados and to invite healthcare private investment into Barbados, I want to accuse the government of having overemphasized private healthcare at the expense of public healthcare in this country. I therefore place the responsibility for the declining standards at the QEH squarely within the hands of this government. This government's emphasis has been one, and I will say it in plain language, of bringing private health facilities to this country. And that is noble. We all support it. But it must not, cannot, and will not be done at the expense of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The augmentation of public health must continue to be done properly within the polyclinics. And whoever built the polyclinics, whoever conceptualized polyclinics in this country, I don't know who it is, but they deserve commendation. Beg pardon? Freddie? I doubt it. Really? Okay. Well, we don't care, they're there. Okay. But what has happened, Your Honor, is that the government has lost its way in terms of healthcare and healthcare delivery and public healthcare delivery. We have said at the start that health, the impairment to health, is the second greatest leveler. The reality is that the majority of people in this country cannot afford expensive health care. They cannot. You don't need any PhD in anything to know that. And that is why the lines at the A&E are so long, because they cannot afford to go to a private healthcare facility. And even the well-to-do sometimes have to go there because of the quality of care that is guaranteed in that facility. And this is not to make a political statement, but it is known that people die because the wait is too long. One of the best friends I ever had, he was scheduled a CAT scan. He wanted a CAT scan last October, I believe it was, and they told him he had to come in March. Of course, he died before March. The CAT scan was paid for, and it was only after the CAT scan was paid for that he discovered what was the nature of his malady. But if he had not had that CAT scan in October, he would have died when he died this year, and he would not have known why he died. And so his death would have been far less than dignified. He would just have wasted. And that is an example of the plight of the poor in this country. I heard somewhere this morning that unless we listen to the voice of suffering, we will never know the truth. And government has a duty, not an exclusive duty, but government always has a duty to listen to the voice of those who suffer. And I have warned this government before to stop this charade of seeking celebrity status. I wonder if I should say this, ma'am. I really wonder if I should say what I am thinking of saying. But I will just say to this government, stop the charade of seeking celebrity status in a country where there is widespread suffering. And while the people in this country are suffering, the government and its representatives are doing public dances. And it is annoying that big, hardback, mature people. That's not an insult, ma'am. That's a compliment. A hardback means that you're well experienced. Big, hardback people ignore the voices of suffering, and they want to be celebrities. So every cockfight they're at, posing off and dancing. brain of a government that has run amok in its taxation policy. And Your Honor, I refer to the situation at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I began by saying that when a man is ill, whether it is mental, physical, or psychological, he must be treated, he or she, man or woman, he or she, they must be treated with respect. And if a government claims to be treating the ill with respect, they must also treat those who care for them with respect. The nurses in this country, the treatment of the nurses in this country leaves much to be desired. We all saw the video recently, and that was not the first bit of evidence. What they did to the lady, they deported her? What they did to her? She just told the truth. That was just evidence of this government's neglect, not only of the unwell, but those whose jobs are to treat and to cure the unwell. How can you claim to care about the unwell when you don't care for the caregivers of the unwell? They're not treating the nurses in this country properly. They're not treating the doctors in this country properly. They're understaffing the institutions. They know the hours that doctors work. They know the personal and professional care that doctors dedicate to the sick in this country. Or people only have value to this government when they can jump up and do bad. Do Dixie. At the headquarters up by the stadium. There's no headquarters. That is no headquarters. So, ma'am, if you don't have the capacity to do Dixie, stay from up there. That is now the headquarters. I beg your pardon, ma'am. I do enjoy your sense of humor. And you know that. But this government is not treating people in this country well. And if they're not treating those who are in good health well, and they're not treating the sick people well, how must we treat this government? With disdain? I say not. Don't treat the government with disdain. Treat this government with some compassion, because there's a time coming, you know, ma'am. There's a time coming. I think it was one of the singers who said, the Honourable Member for St. Lucie is looking very nervous. But who was it that sang about killing me softly with love? Well, the people in this country are going to kill these hopes and ambitions, those hopes and ambitions for a third term softly. It won't be with love, though. It won't be with love. Well, they're running you again?
Please allow the honourable member to complete.
And so, ma'am, that is the voice of suffering which tells the truth. The voice of suffering telling truths to which this government remains deaf. Pay some attention to the public health department. Pay some attention to the polyclinics. Pay some attention to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Pay some attention to the A&E department. And take the advice of the second most powerful man in this government, that this government needs to return to the days when he himself was working there. I think that's sometime in the 80s and 90s, before he was lifted out of professional service and brought into the public service of this country. And who knew that he would ascend to that duopoly that duumvirate, I beg your pardon, that duumvirate of power ahead of the 6 senior ministers that populate this government. 6 or 7. You know how many there are, ma'am? You don't. You don't count them.
You were doing your speech, sir. Please continue.
Yes. I just wanted a little help. But there are several senior ministers in this government. And a deputy prime minister, incidentally. Several senior ministers and a deputy prime minister. And the honourable member for St. Lucie is trying to interrupt me, telling me I have nothing else to say. It isn't that I have nothing else to say on health. It's that he does not want me to say a certain thing about health. But when he starts the campaign, he will discover that the very problem the Attorney General is trying to solve exists also in his neglected constituency. St. Lucie is one of the worst, not only for administrative misrepresentation, but for environmental neglect in the silence of the honourable member for St. Lucie. But we began dealing with next door to him. St. Peter is worse than St. Lucie, so he can take some consolation from that. So that, Your Honour, that is my short contribution today. And essentially it is that this amendment is of suspect validity. It is of suspect validity. And not for the first time will this Attorney General bring legislation here that is of suspect validity. I was given the assurance by persons in authority that this matter will be referred to Select Committee. I don't know if that is government's concession or admission that something is wrong with the legislation. Perhaps the Honourable Attorney General will explain to this country whether what I was told that this is going to Select Committee is true. And he will, in his reply, tell this country why it is going to Select Committee. Beg your pardon? It's not? They lied to me? Well, I can show you all the message. I can show you all the message. No wonder.
Point of order. I don't know why the
Honourable
honourable
member for
member
St. Joseph.
has to refer to any message. It is on. If you would listen, as clearly you don't, you would have heard me say twice in the course of my speech that the matter is being referred to Select Committee. You needn't rely on any WhatsApp message. I've said so. There's a Select Committee. A specific name is, let me refer to the order paper that you never get to look at. Because if you did, you would see. It is called the Committee on Social Sector and Environment. And Environment. And it is for that reason that it is going to the Select Committee.
I'm obliged to the Honourable Attorney General. I am always humble enough to concede. And I didn't listen to the whole of his speech. I didn't hear. I tried to listen, but I didn't hear a lot of it, the baritone. But he will add to that and tell this Parliament why yet another piece of legislation is going to Select Committee. If he wishes to, he can interrupt me and tell the country now why. Because it is only in exceptional cases that legislation goes to the Select Committee. He has the opportunity now, Your Honor, to tell this country why he comes in here and speaks with such utmost confidence. And at the end of it, he asks for it to be passed. Why then is he sending it to Select Committee? Please, Mr. Attorney General. Please, Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Madam Speaker,
another one.
the Honourable Member is misleading the House. at the end of his contribution, the Honourable Attorney General begged that it be read a second time. At no point has he asked that it be passed, and he indicated before that that this matter will be going to select committee. So that is a clear misleading, if ever there was one. At no point did the Honourable Attorney General ask that this bill be now passed.
Yes, let me apologize to him for misquoting him. Being read a second time is on the road to passage. And even the honorable member for Christchurch, he knows that. That when a man ritualistically asks for a second reading, he is asking that the road to passage of the legislation proposed should be made clear.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable member is misleading the chamber. In order for the debate to proceed, the presenter of the bill has to ask that it be read a second time, at which point the floor is open to debate on the matter. So while it may be one of the steps, there are many steps to go to. And had he not asked for it to be read a second time, then the honourable leader of the opposition could not have stood up here and wasted our time for the last hour.
Thank you for your clarification, honourable member.
I did say that when he made that ritualistic statement, he was clearing the road to passage of the legislation. I don't think we need to delay ourselves on these trivial matters. When a speaker says, beg your pardon,
Yeah,
yes.
honourable member, it is not a trivial matter. We are all here
Precisely.
about the people's business.
Yes.
And the clarification has been made by the honourable member, and I would rather you not express it in that way,
yes,
because
yes,
it is also going to misleading, according to my understanding.
Yes,
So
Your
could we
Honor.
get back, sir, to the
Yes,
discussion as it is presented? Thank you.
Yes. I did use the word ritualistic, but he is clearing the way for the bill to be, the amendment, the proposed amendment to become law. That's nothing to argue about. I'm not saying the thing is trivial itself. I'm saying the intervention is trivial. So that, Your Honor, we've had two interventions, and none of those who intervened has explained to this Parliament and the people of Barbados why it is going to select committee. None of them has explained that. And in reply, they will seize the opportunity to say that. Why is it going to select committee? When they speak again, they can say, Ma, you ain't say it yet.
Honourable member, my impression from my listening, and I'm trying to listen very carefully, I get the impression that both honourable members on that side have already indicated.
He
So
accused
we
me
will
of-
just want to move on.
He accused me of not listening. He accused me of not listening. He will get a
But
chance.
sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but because you indicated that you were in your car and at points you heard things and some aspects of the presentation you did not. So perhaps you missed on that element of it. So now we've got the clarification. Can we move on, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you, Your Honor. And I will still ask that they clearly explain to the public why this bill, unlike most bills, is going to select committee. I just want him to do it again. I just want him to do it again. For those who missed it. So, Your Honor, that is my contribution. Those are my concerns. Not only legal, but political. I've expressed concern for the proper treatment of those who work in health care in this country. I've explained with some evidence the maltreatment that is visited on workers in health care in this country, and I would hope that the government finds it fit to respond to the plight of those who work in health care in this country. I'm obliged to you, ma'am.
Madam Speaker.
Honourable member.
Sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker. Sorry.
Honourable member. You have the floor, sir.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm in the unenviable position of having to park what it is that I was going to say and start by addressing and redirecting the honorable member for Christchurch South onto the path of righteousness. Madam Speaker, let me start with the last thing he said, because that's probably the thing freshest in people's mind. And there was some indication or suggestion that we were doing something abnormal in referring this matter to select committee. Now,
Honourable members, could we please allow the honourable member for Christchurch East to continue? Thank you.
So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I find it exceedingly strange that what is perhaps the greatest signal of democracy from this Parliament, that of referring matters to select committee so that the public can actually weigh in and hear the voice of all, is something that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is casting aspersions on or suggesting is being used for an improper motive. Select committee, Madam Deputy Speaker, allows for the widest possible contribution, debate, and taking into account of all opinions. It's not a lack of confidence, Madam, but perhaps the greatest manifestation of our democracy. And I don't know what the point was in deliberately misquoting and misrepresenting what the presenter of the bill did. I thought perhaps on the first occasion it may be just that the honourable member for Christchurch South was not paying attention. I thought on the second occasion that he must be hard of hearing. By the third time, Madam Deputy Speaker, I thought this has to be a most distinct and sinister objective. Because the Honourable Attorney General, having clearly, pellucidly, and painstakingly pointed out why it's going to select committee, he said, and I quote, that this is going to select committee because it is the policy of this government for all transformational matters that the people of Barbados will have a right to be heard on them. That was what he said. That is the policy of the government. That is on the record of Hansard. And I hope that the honourable member for Christchurch South now has his answer. If he does, I can move on. The other issue, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable member is learned in the law. He's lettered in the law. He is at the pinnacle of his legal career. So I actually do not understand how simple legal interpretation and common sense would not be applied in this chamber as he tries to use it in a court of law. The honourable member indicated that we are treading on the fringes of constitutionality. He said it is possibly illegal to attach to a land tax a charge or a remediation charge. It is quite possibly trespass on constitutionality, and that we are running amok in our desire to tax people. Madam Deputy Speaker, if the honourable member had chosen to actually read the legislation, it says at section 5, where any costs incurred in the execution of work on property, and I must say that the Honourable Attorney General did go through this painstakingly as well. Where any costs incurred in the execution of work on property or administrative penalty imposed for the contravention of or failure to comply with the regulations made under Section 10(1) of the Health Services Act is due to the act or omission of the owner of that property, it shall be a charge on that property and may be added to the land tax imposed under Section 5.2. It is not a part of the land tax. It is not subsumed under the land tax. It's not incorporated within the land tax. It is not any tax at all. But where we fell down before, and he started by saying this is not the AG's finest moment. And sometimes, ma'am, it is unseemly to defend yourself against trivialities. And sometimes then other persons have to step in and point out, because you may not wish to reduce yourself in your own defense to it, but I can't let it pass. He pointed out that this is not the AG's finest moment, that the AG admitted to the fact that government, as the largest landowner, had a number of overgrown lots, and pointed out that the AG admitted effectively that the government is one of the chief culprits in it. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government, the last government, the government before, every single government has wrestled with this issue. Every single government has had to endure the complaints of their constituents on this issue. Every single government has tried to remediate, using the public purse, the matter of overgrown lots and derelict properties. But it is this government that has chosen to actually amend the legislation, give it some teeth, give it some relevance, and make it possible of actually being worked. So I take issue, and I think this is one of the AG's finest moments. It is one of our finest moments, one of the biggest complaints in the whole of Barbados. All of us get it. If you bother to go through Goodland Gardens, you get it too. But one of the biggest complaints, Madam Deputy Speaker, is with overgrown lots. Madam Speaker, I would tell you that a particular district in Christchurch East, in Coverley, their biggest issue was a massive overgrown lot of how many acres it was? About 4 acres. It used to be a landfill, a dump. I promised them that I would deal with it for them. Because the last government, which fell to the hands of the party which the Honourable Leader of the Opposition now purports to represent, they did nothing. Madam Deputy Speaker, I walk around, I beg, I canvass donations, I ask for help, I beg people for equipment. I am not even going to tell you what the cost of clearing that lot was. The cost of clearing that lot was a lot of money. A lot. More than I earn a month. More than I probably earn in 2 months. Right? That is unsustainable. It is completely unsustainable. So what has to happen is we now have to create ways to deal with these things, to correct unsustainable situations, because half the time it falls to the MPs. If the Honourable Member browsed through his constituency and did what we all do, chances are he would have had to pull his pocket at some point in time to clear somebody's lot that had nothing to do with him. It cannot be sustained. Somebody has to pay for it. Yep. So we've now said, you know what? The little $5 or $10 fines were not working. Even if you rack them up, how you can collect them? We accept that we're not hauling people before the courts. We're going to make you responsible. It'll be a civil penalty. It'll be a civil penalty. But it makes no sense to have a civil penalty that's incapable of being collected. The common sense thing, and everybody has said it one way or the other, It has been mooted. It has been put forward as a solution. It has been the common man on the street has said, what you doing, just add it to the land tax? Why don't you just add it to the land tax? Maybe we should have said add it to the land tax bill. This is not a tax. It is not calculated or referenced in relation to the value of the property as land tax is. It has no bearing on the value of your property. You run your lot. You don't need to protect me from him, ma'am. Please don't even waste.
Please allow him, sir, Honourable Member, Vice Church. Please allow him. Sir, order, please. Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the land tax bill goes out to all property owners. And the property owners are the ones who are held responsible in this legislation. The land tax bill goes out to all property owners once a year. It makes sense. If you have something now attaching to the land, being a charge on the land in the same way that the water tax is, in the same way that the land tax is, there's certain things that form charges on the land and run with the land. What that means is that you can't get away from it. If you sell the land, it's going with the land. It has to be paid off from the proceeds of the conveyance. Your land tax, if you're in arrears, has to be paid off before the land is transferred. Your water rates, if you're in arrears, has to be paid off before the transfer is effected. In the exact same way, if we are now saying this is a charge on the land, because this is the only way to make this seriously enforceable, if we're saying this is a charge on the land, well then it either needs to be collected or added on to the land, to the water tax, the water bill, or it needs to be added on to the land tax bill. And understand, when the bill comes, it's not going to say land tax $10,000. If they had to pay $1,000 to clear your land, it's not going to say land tax no $11,000. It's going to say land tax $10,000, remediation fee for property $1,000. So you can clearly see what is what. The land tax will be separated from there. It's added to the same bill. But of course it will be itemized. It is not
a point of clarification, Your Honor. If you don't mind.
Honourable Member.
Ma'am, permit me to read for the honourable member's benefit. I'm clarifying what he is saying.
Clarification.
But you actually
Elucidation,
can't.
I beg your pardon. Elucidation.
But you can't elucidate
All right,
what I'm
all
saying.
right, all right,
Members,
all right,
please.
all right.
Honourable members, please.
Stop me from talking.
Honourable Member for Christchurch.
Stop me from talking.
Honourable Member for Christchurch South, we must have order in here.
Yes,
You were
thank you,
given
ma'am.
the opportunity, sir, to make your presentation
Yes, ma'am.
uninterrupted. If the point you're raising in order to put over the matter is not a parliamentary aspect
Yes,
of procedure,
elucidation, I was corrected.
then unless the
Elucidation.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East gives way to you,
Yes.
please,
Thank
other
you,
than
ma'am.
that, sir, please take your seat.
I'm fighting for one of them.
No, but it has nothing to do with fair, sir. You will not get fair in here. We are all members of Parliament. We are honourable persons, and we will respect each other's views. On the outside, that might be a different story in another place. Thank you, sir. The clerk now will assist me in this exercise, please. Honourable Member, please, if you've chosen one of the aspects of intervention
Yes.
by using what is procedure in this
Yes,
honourable
yes,
chamber,
yes. Just a slip.
that,
Just a slip.
well, I would not expect you, sir, your distinguished level to slip.
Yes, we all make slips.
However, if it is
I'm going to come to the substance.
the matter you ask for the opportunity to intervene, that is not parliamentary. And therefore, you just take your seat for a moment, sir, so I can finish explaining to you. Yeah, I don't have legal brain either, but I'm being guided by.
So I cannot.
When I'm speaking, please.
Oh, I'm
Please,
sorry.
kindly take your
I'm sorry.
seat. You were here long enough, sir. Please take your seat. Yes, sir. I would not be as familiar as the distinguished speaker of this chamber here, but I'm in the learning process, and I would want for us, whether in his absence or presence, to be able to follow procedures, because that is as the system is. And therefore, we are all members in here, adults, members of parliament. We respect each other's view, and we follow the guidelines as are represented in this honorable chamber. The point you started to intervene on is not the regular route. It is either elucidation, point of order, and so on. And therefore, that was not done just now. And unless it is elucidation you ask for, and the honorable member is not willing to give way, then you have to take your seat so that the honorable member can continue his presentation. So that there was neither of the two that you had used just though you'd used something that's not familiar, I'm not familiar with, that's not parliamentary, and therefore you would have to do it in another way. But let us continue. We were going smoothly all morning, and I would wish for us to remain at the professional level, because at the end of the day, the public is watching us, and we are here to represent their needs, their interests. Let us continue, please, in the spirit of camaraderie. Thank you, sir.
As it pleases you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member has not given way
with
to you
respect,
because
I'm actually not giving
So
way.
can you take your seat?
I'm not giving way.
I cannot raise a point
Not-
of order, ma'am. A point of
But-
order.
Well, you would have to know that, sir. You're the legal person. I am just trying to follow it by the
Yes,
book to
can
make
I
sure
raise a
we
point of
follow
order, ma'am?
procedure.
No, I'm
What would be your
I'm not
point of
asking
order?
The
What
members
has-
up there, I'm asking you, ma'am. Can I raise a point of order?
What is your point of order, sir?
Thank you very much, ma'am.
What is your point of order when you intervene?
I'm going to do it now.
Yeah, but the honourable member is still on his feet because he
they
hasn't
have to
given
say-
way to you because it was
They
not
have
the
to say-
correct procedure that you were following.
He has sat, ma'am. He has
But
sat.
now that he has sat, may I please?
Yes, and I want to indicate that the honourable member may have misled.
On what point are you standing?
A point of order that.
On a point of order?
Yes,
What
ma'am.
is-
All
yes,
right,
please
all
explain,
right, wait,
sir.
the member you're going to hear.
Please explain, sir.
No, I'm making it nothing.
Don't mind the asides. Honourable member,
No,
please.
well, they shout, you know.
Honourable member for Christchurch South, please.
They shout very hard.
Yeah, but we all do. And even when we have no need to shout, they're shouting. But we are here as a distinguished chamber
Yes.
where the rest of Barbados and the world is watching us, and our young people are concerned as well as our aged. Therefore, let us keep the high level that this distinguished chamber has always set for many, many generations. And you are free to stand on the point you wish to make, whether it's
Yes.
a point of order or elucidation, whatever the matter is.
Yes.
Please let us
Point
do
of
it the
order.
right way, and then the honourable member, I will determine precisely what the situation is. So would you please say, sir, what your
Yes.
intervention would be?
I'm obliged to you, ma'am. Now, the honourable member for Christchurch East told this parliament.
All right,
It's
with
a
with
point
respect,
of order. You
Madam
still have not
Deputy Speaker,
indicated.
The point of order that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition tried to raise was that I may have misled the House. That is not a point of order. You cannot be raising a point of order. I may have misled the House.
Semantics, that you misled them then.
It's not semantics.
Honourable members,
Be polite.
please, I cannot have both of you standing at the same time. This is an orderly chamber. We will wish to continue that tradition. Therefore, the honourable member for Christchurch East was on his feet. I cannot acknowledge your intervention unless he gives way to you if you're saying elucidation, whatever. So would you please then indicate your purpose to stand?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. You see, a little politeness hasn't helped me.
Are you on a point of order, sir?
He has misled the chamber.
Are you on a point of order,
Yes,
sir?
I am, Your Honour.
Or please indicate how.
Thank you, ma'am. The honourable member told this House that the imposition is merely adding to the land tax bill. He used the word bill. I want to bring it to his attention and to this House's attention that that is not the wording of the statute. The statute says, all right, just let me say it now. It shall be a charge on that property and be added to the land tax imposed under Section 5.2 of the Land Tax Act, Chapter 78A of the Laws of Barbados. It does not say in that section that it is merely added to the bill. It says it shall be added to the land tax. In other words, It is a part of the tax.
Madam,
Honourable
Madam
member,
Deputy Speaker,
you made your point. Honourable member, Christchurch East.
I clearly
His point.
explained. It is a charge, just like the water rates are a charge. It's being collected by being added to the land tax. It is not, wait, hold on, no, I'm not
man,
finished.
He's misleading you.
Honourable
He
member
said
for Christchurch
added to
South,
the land tax
please.
bill.
You just cannot jump up like that. This honourable chamber, and if his honour were here, I know that it would have been different. This honourable chamber must conform with the rules and regulations of the chamber. The honourable member for Christchurch East is giving a response to your allegations, sir. Honourable member, please continue.
If we call for Hansard, right? If we call for Hansard, it will clearly show that I said, maybe it should have been said, added to the land tax bill. But I clearly said it was added to the land tax. It is not a land tax. It is not subsumed under the land tax. It is not absorbed into the land tax. It is added. I'm not saying anything different now.
And that the two will be separate. It will
Itemized
highlight how much the
separate in the
land
bill.
tax is because we've written it. So I'm there with you on that, sir. Would you please continue, honourable member for Christchurch East?
Madam, what amazes me here? What amazes me here, right? We've had a problem for years. We're now trying to bring it to resolution to help my constituents, to help the constituents in St. Peter, St. Lucie, St. Michael, Christchurch South.
Honourable member for, please, honourable member for Christchurch South, you had the privilege to make your speeches or your comments. We listened quietly. Please give the honourable member for Christchurch East the opportunity to explain, because you have understood it differently from all the others whom I'm hearing. I've heard his point. Please let him continue to explain so that the order can continue, because at the end of the day, we are all in here as members of Parliament to represent the interests of Barbadians wherever they are. So let us give the honourable member his opportunity to continue, and then we could always get your point of order, elucidation, whatever it is you request. But at this time, the honourable member for Christchurch East has the floor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll just bring that part to a close by saying, I read, Madam Speaker, I read out the section of the Act. I can't be misleading anybody when I read the exact wording of the Act, which ended with, and be added to the land tax imposed under Section 52. I drew the distinction, and I painfully clarified in a way that I should not have to the honourable member. I painfully clarified. It is not a tax. It is not calculated by reference to the value of the land. Actually, you cannot even, you know what your land tax is based on the land tax rate at the beginning of the year. You know what your land tax bill is going to have on. It doesn't go up or go down. It is as stated in the land tax provisions. With this one, Madam Deputy Speaker, you have no idea what the remediation charge is going to be. It depends on when you rectify the issue. It may be the $300 initial penalty. It may be $10 per day for 2 days, 10 days, 20 days, a whole year. It is not possible of being calculated with the land tax. Hence, it is added to it. Madam Deputy Speaker, what amazes me, right, is the honourable member has, he calls himself the conscience of the people, and he calls himself the voice and the conscience of this house, right?
On what matter do you stand, honourable member, please? Thank you. Honourable member for Christchurch East, please continue.
We are trying to deal with something. Owners of land in Barbados, we all accept. Everybody from the smallest person to the biggest person, we accept now they have to be held accountable for what they do with the land. The condition of your land is your responsibility as a landowner. If it has to be maintained, you as the landowner need to maintain it. Because if I keep my land properly and I keep all in my property well mowed, treated for insects, and the lot next to me is overgrown, I might as well be doing nothing. The mosquitoes don't stop at the landmarks. The rats come through where they're not invited. Correct. Nothing worse, ma'am, than you clean your house. Ma'am, there's nothing worse than you clean your house, clean your property, get it in order, and you see a rat where it's not wanted. Nothing worse than that. Where it is not wanted. Madam, if we can make this work, and I take the point from the leader of the opposition, that the government probably is the largest landowner in Barbados. And the government must maintain their lands. Why does the government have difficulty maintaining their lands? Because when the lot next to me is overgrown, I call health or environment, and they gotta send somebody from NCC, drainage, some other debushing, they gotta send somebody to clean mine. And it's not just mine, it's replicated across the board. In Chancery Lane, they got a lot of overgrown bush. People refusing to clean their properties. The people call me. I have to call the honorable member all the time. I can call the names, Mr. Ronald Chapman, right? The CMO, whoever, everybody. You call them trying to get a lot clean. Right now, Madam Deputy Speaker, my last opponent bought a hearse. And he had a hearse parked in the garage of his constituency office. I don't know why. But he's no longer with us. But the hearse remains. The hearse has moved from the garage onto a lot of land close by where it has been abandoned. And it's harboring rats and other vermin. And people are complaining. Right? It got to be moved by somebody. We can't get anybody to move it, so I have once again turned to the Honourable Minister for the Environment and asked him please to sort it out. But if the government has to keep doing that, then the government does not have the resources to manage its own large land portfolio. If persons are made responsible for their lots, if persons are made responsible for the conditions of their properties, and they have to maintain out their pocket, it now frees up the resources of the government to do the maintenance on the government's land. And if, perchance, Madam Deputy Speaker, with this in place, and the responsibility falls on you, the landowner, you don't do it, as the AG said, government is the remedy of last resort. If the government has to step in and clean it for you, because it's a nuisance to everybody else, then you have to pay. You have to stand the cost of that. The government is no longer cleaning people's properties for free. It is unsustainable. And if you have to pay for it, Madam Deputy Speaker, then we, the government, have to collect it back.
Yep.
And that is done by making it a charge on your land. This is as serious as it gets. You make it a charge on your land, you can't get away from it, you can't sell the land and escape it. It's a charge that has to be dealt with and paid in the same way as land tax, in the same way as water rates. What I would love to hear for once from the honourable member came in, ma'am, and played this in the way that he doesn't play cricket. I have seen him play cricket, and Madam Deputy Speaker, watching him bat is one of the most painful experiences possible. He will spend the entire day playing and missing, being very defensive, and eking his score along. But for some reason, he came here in this debate with a bunch of cow swipes, wild swipes. But madam, if you're talking about my cricketing prowess, I never pretended to be a good cricketer. I'm a horrible cricketer. I swear, well, I own it. I own it. Madam Deputy Speaker,
I am hearing you, sir.
my point simply is, you know what? If you agree that the landowners have to pay for their neglect of their land, if you agree that they have to pay for the nuisance to clear any nuisances they created with somebody else, then you agree that if the government has to do it, it has to be recovered. So I tell you what, For all the naysayers, this is the best avenue we came up with. This is the best avenue that the government has come up with. If somebody has a different plan, then I invite them to turn up at the select committee and put the alternative proposal to the government, at which point we will do what we have always done. If ye, the public, come up with something better than what we have done, we will incorporate it into the legislation. So rather than sniping from over there, Madam Deputy Speaker, I encourage the leader of the opposition to either appear in person or send legal counsel from his side. But the fact remains, the avenue we've chosen affords him the opportunity to come and make a valuable contribution for once, and let us press forward with legislation as in the best interest of Barbados. I will wrap up now, Madam Deputy Speaker, because this has been a very arduous exercise. There's nothing worse, ma'am. I'm a dog person. I have been bitten once in my life. I can go, the Deputy Prime Minister has been in awe sometimes. When I go to people's houses, they play with their big dogs. I've been bitten once, Madam Deputy Speaker, but it was a small little, fluffy, annoying dog. I was trying to walk, minding my business, and this little annoying dog came nipping at my feet. Nipping, and then put a bite on me. And I then paused and looked at this dog and thought, what should I do with it? I do not believe in cruelty to animals, so I decided, you know what? Let me let the dog go on its merry way. Eventually, it will bite the wrong person, and that person will deal with it. But that's not for me to do with the dog then, and it's not for me to do with others no. Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker. I am proud to be associated with this. I am pleased that we have gotten here. This has been a collaborative effort from probably all of the ministers and the parliamentary party, everybody weighing in. This has been a collaborative effort to get us to this point. We have heard the cries of the people in Paris Speaks. We have heard the cries of our constituents. We have heard the cries of all of those who've been affected by people being negligent with their properties and creating nuisances. I realize you went silent at the word nuisances, but creating nuisances that affect us all. It may not seem like a big thing. Actually, we refer to it as the Bush Bill. We refer to it as the Bush Bill. It may of itself not seem like a big thing. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is one of those pieces of legislation that touches and concerns all of us. This is one of those pieces of legislation that, Madam Deputy Speaker, when it's implemented, will clean up all around us. It may not clean up the mess in George Street. And quite frankly, that mess and nuisance is for them and them alone. But I will tell you, it will have a positive impact on the rest of Barbados. And I firmly stand behind this bill and support this bill 110%. I'm obliged.
Honourable member.
Madam Deputy Chair, the English cleric, John Wesley, once said that cleanliness is next to godliness. And I have heard that repeated over and over, especially by those who I hold close to my heart, the elderly folk, from a young, impressionable man coming up. Cleanliness is next to godliness. And so much so that it has now become part of the vernacular, the Bajan vernacular. But having that axiom that speaks to a wholesomeness about how we keep our environment and not living it is where the dichotomy lies. Not living it. And although I want to be here standing today at this very hour, supporting this amendment, I want to equally say that I am also ashamed that I have to be here to do this. This should be part of who we are as a people. Keeping our surroundings clean should be a part of the basic way of life. It should be imbued as part of our DNA. But a government has to do what a government has to do. And unfortunately, this is not the case. And there's also a saying that reveals that he who feels it knows it. I have felt it. I have felt it as minister who operates in the fulcrum of this discussion, Minister of Environment. I have been inundated with calls morning, noon, and night from colleagues, from residents across the length and breadth of this country. I see Madam Deputy Speaker shaking her head because I've heard that nice voice in my ears sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning about the bush situation that you have here.
On the phone.
On the phone. I wouldn't imagine it would be any other place else, although you are at that ripe age. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a problem. A very serious problem across this country. And as I said, unfortunately, we have to take this route of having an administrative fee and a change to the amendment of the legislation. Unfortunately. But it has to be done. It is called changing a culture. And unfortunately, bad practices step in over a period of time. I know from a young man, I would often see my mother and those other persons in the community, the older folk, cleaning with a hoe, even with a knife, picking all those weeds. It was a part of who we were. And it spoke to beautiful Barbados. We cannot have, and I repeat, we cannot have an idyllic song by the most iconic group, the Merry Men, speaking of beautiful Barbados and not keeping our surroundings clean. The two don't add up. And so, we as a government are challenged with having to clean the whole entire country. And I want to say that, and the Member of Parliament for Christchurch East, he alluded to it earlier. The reason why government becomes one of the biggest culprits is because most of the time we are extending our tentacles across the country, doing it for private citizens. But that time now has come, Madam Deputy Chair, to a stage where we are saying enough is enough, and it is incumbent now on landowners to clean their own properties, be responsible citizens, and do the right thing. Because that is what it is. It is about doing the right thing and respecting your neighbors. If there are the basic tenets that must carry this country, those tenets that speak to respect, care, understanding, and appreciation for each other, if we are to hold those tenets close to our hearts, then there is no way, Madam Deputy Chair, that you will have a piece of land in St. Thomas and live in Christchurch and refuse to take care of your land where it then becomes in a disused state. And what happens when this land becomes in a disused state? I remember going to open a cleaning green park in, this is Jenswick St. Philip. And an old lady peeped out the window. And she said, "Minister, I am so glad that you are cleaning this property beside me, because the lady lives in St. Andrew. She doesn't frequent this area. And I'm in bare problems. Not only are the rats, the mosquitoes, and other vermin I have threat to me and my family at my age, but I want you to remember something, and this is a maxim that stuck with me until this moment in my life." She said, "You know something, Minister? I am at 86 years old. I'm an octogenarian. And you know how it started to relate my heart? She's octogenarian, but she said, you know something? Every man cannot be a bush, but every bush can be a man. That's what she told me. You know what she was basically telling me, Madam Deputy Chair? That in that bush, a man could be hiding. A man could be hiding. That's what she is not only talking about the health threat associated with it. She's not only talking about environmental threat, the threat to our ecosystems and our biodiversity, and I will speak about that later on. She's speaking about the threat to her person, her physical being, and her safety, as the Member of Parliament for Peter rightfully said, her safety, because at that old, nice old age, her safety and her physical being could be threatened. Because she said, every bush could be a man, meaning that a man could hide in the bush and do whatever he wants to do with her family and her life as she's concerned with. This is the real situation that we are faced with. It is a serious situation. And so, as a responsible government, we felt it incumbent to make amendments so that Barbadians will have no other choice than to be responsible for themselves and their properties. And when I said I have threat, I know the situation as it relates to the environmental health officers and the arduous task they have to ensure notices are served on landowners across the length and breadth of this country. As I said before, the NCC, which is part of my ministry, and SSA, are inundated, stretched to capacity with phone calls and with instructions and orders to clear disused land across Barbados. It is out of control, Madam Deputy Chair, and this is one of the ways that we intend to solve this issue. I am saying that environmentally, it is a concern for us. And we know the importance of ridding the country of invasive flora. That concern is real from an environmental perspective. We are not talking about elasticized cleaning in such a way that we destroy our green carbon sink. We are talking about strategically cleaning areas in a way to preserve not only that flora which is beneficial to us, our fruit trees and other ornamentals that seek to do that which we know should be done in order to preserve our climate integrity, because the current trajectory, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that the 1.5, that easy of the town adage, 1.5 to stay alive, can only be realized on this current trajectory in the year 2040. So it is important that we allow trees also to do those things in terms of sequestration and the other things that they're supposed to do. Equally, the trees are responsible for reducing all the harmful chemicals in the soil. So there is an important conversation about keeping those trees that we need to keep. So it'll be strategic cleaning. The trees are also responsible for holding soils together. So there's a lot of conversation as it relates to what we would do in terms of cleaning. So there will be no holistic cleaning of Barbados. We will take away all of the green environment. I want to say, Madam Deputy Chair, that where there is overgrown bush, there is also the potential for illegal dumping. Another scourge in this society, one that you would have raised your voice until you got vocal fright, speaking about across the length and breadth of this country. It is a scourge that we must address as well. There is legislation that speaks to a $5,000 fee, but unfortunately, being able to identify those culprits and catch them red-handed, as we would say, is a big challenge. We have started to put cameras in a clandestine way across our gullies so that we can track those persons who are doing this illegal activity. It is a big concern for us. And of course, with the overgrown lots and bush, we know that this can affect our water courses in terms of the pathways and cause flooding in certain areas. It is a serious, serious problem with overgrown lots in the country. We have had the calls of Barbadians, and we are saying as a government, this amendment seeks to acquiesce to those calls in a meaningful way. And we are not bringing any criminal charges towards any individual. We have said that the penalties, the administrative penalties, are penalties associated with the land tax bill and the provisions thereof. And we have said that persons will be encouraged, they will be given a period of time to make the remediation, the amendments that they're supposed to make to their properties. And then, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will do what we have to do as a government. I am saying that it also allows for entrepreneurial opportunities for persons who would have worked in the ASH program, those persons in the Summer 20 program who provide services, independent service providers. They can now form groups, cooperatives, and come and quote on those derelict areas so that they can get some of the work. It allows now the opportunity for us to build a cadre of entrepreneurs and empower our people across the land so that they can become part of the workforce. It is therefore creating, when we have this type of amendment, the opportunity for employment. And that is very, very important because persons now can become landscapers of sorts and go around the district and help government to clean those properties. I am saying, Madam Deputy Chair, that this will allow Barbadians to seize the opportunity for those persons who neglect their duties. I am saying that it is unfortunate, as I say, that we have to bring this to Parliament because I believe that Barbadians should really and truly do better. But we have to do what we have to do as a responsible government. There is a problem, an ongoing problem, Madam Deputy Speaker, where rats and rodents and health is concerned. We've had situations where dengue has threatened to disrupt the livelihoods of our citizens. And it's not only a health threat, it's a financial threat because there is a financial cost to providing health services in Barbados. I am saying, Madam Deputy Chair, that I support this amendment unequivocally. I want to thank the AG for bringing it so we can have Barbados be in that beautiful place that we know it's supposed to be. I'm imploring all Barbadians to look after their properties because it is their responsibility. This must speak to who we are. You can't have songs going around the country. This is who we are, all of we, beautiful Barbados. And then on the other hand, we are doing the opposite. It is not the way how we're supposed to operate as a country. We invite persons from all over the world, tourist destination, and yet still we are not doing the right things. When you invite persons in your homes, the first thing you do is clean up and pretty up. I have started the Clean and Green program across Barbados, and I want to say that we started the journey. There's a saying that the journey of 1,000 miles begin with one first step. We started with one Clean and Green site, and now we have 104. You know, I like the old numbers. 104. Cleaning and greening all over Barbados. And the Member of Parliament. And, I have some beautiful ones in Christchurch South. And the Member of Parliament opened it, the Clean and Green sites with me as well. Opened it with me. And the Member of Parliament who just spoke from Christchurch East. I remember they said, you spoke about Coverly. Those 3 to 4 acres of disused land, it was gully, bush. And now you have one of the most pristine parks where I see people playing football and cricket and all the children enjoying themselves. That is what we are trying to do. We are trying to reform and beautify this country so that Barbadians can have a sense of appreciation. You can go to these sites, and all the member of parliament, all of my colleagues can attest to the difference, the transformational difference it has made in their communities. The fact that persons can now go and launch and recreate, can balance their humors in an environment which is clean, green, and beautiful. It must be part of who we are as a country. And I will continue to ensure that we do our cleanup, we do what we have to do as a government, that Barbados remains clean and green. It has its parochial sense to it, but equally, internationally, when we talk about greening and greening the world, there is no better way of reducing that leading greenhouse gas carbon dioxide than having the green carbon sink. In Barbados, about the 2 million tons or so that we produce a year, 25% is sequestered with the trees in our green economy, and that is 25% in the blue economy. You leave 50% that remains in the atmosphere. But what I'm saying, Madam Deputy Chair, is that we are able to improve our carbon sinks, green and blue, then there'll be less free carbon in the atmosphere to cause all the harm that it is causing. And then pollution, another existential threat that we are faced with. When there is disused land, there is the potential for persons to dump on it and pollute it, because it is there in a disused state, and it's an easy attraction for persons to do illegal activities on it. And when I say illegal activities, there may be a number of other illegal activities that may happen on disused areas. So, and of course, one that is very important to me, next of the triple planetary crisis, as we will call it, biodiversity loss. When we have disused land and invasive species, there is a loss of our biodiversity. And this is a serious loss because it is a part of the triple planetary crisis that we are faced with, the loss of biodiversity. We have lost, since the industrial era, 250 years ago or so, about over 530 species of plants, about 586 species of animals or so, 1 million insects being threatened as they speak. These are the things that we must concern ourselves with. And if we continue to let land become disused and in a state of, that is not environmentally friendly, then we will lose our biodiversity. Life in this world began with biodiversity. It will end abruptly without it. So I'm saying that having an environment that is clean, that is green, that is taken care of in an eco-friendly way, an ecological way, can only redound to the benefit of our global effort as it relates to fighting off those existential threats that we are faced with. And it is real. You can see what is happening on the horizon. Beryl gave us a stark reminder on July, that fateful morning, when the lives of those fishermen were disrupted in a major way. We saw what it did to other countries. And I want to say the American National Hurricane Center has predicted that over the next 4 months or so, we will have about 30-something systems that will be more aggressive, some predict, or just as aggressive as Beryl. But this is the phenomenon that we are faced with over the next couple of months. And they're also saying that this is the first time that we had a Category 4 hurricane in the month of June. Category 5 in the month of July. Never happened before. Since there were falling hurricanes, never ever happened before. The El Nino and La Nina effect is real. And the oscillation in the Pacific Ocean, what is happening in the Atlantic Ocean with the heat, we are obviously destroying our reefs with the pollution. They are not doing the things that they're supposed to do in terms of providing that surface area coolant. And unfortunately, the reduction in wind shear across the Atlantic Ocean is resulting in these energized systems. I am saying we have to take note that the climate change and the crisis and the phenomenon is real. I would add to that triple planetary crisis by saying that there's a quaternary concern, and that is the heat of the ocean, the heating of the ocean, the increased heating of our seabelt, where the hurricanes and other tsunami activities occur. It is serious, it is real, and I want to say to Barbadians, each of us must be able to help in the effort. We must reduce and stop the illegal dumping, especially of those plastics and other harmful chemicals that can destroy our environment. We must grow more trees, especially our fruit trees, not only for food security, but to do all the other things that we know that trees are supposed to do in terms of helping with our climate crisis. We saw with our naked eyes the importance of trees on the West Coast and coming up more north in St. Peter, when those trees, when using their integrated root network, horizontal and vertical, of course, were able to trap the sand in the embankment and to stop the erosion that was felt, the aggressive erosion that was felt in certain areas. The purpose of trees, I said before, that there's an axiom that speaks to trees saving lives. It saved those beach areas at that last when Beryl hit, in terms of not being able to completely destroy those environments because the trees were there. I am saying that we have to have an important conversation. Persons must realize that what they do to the environment will redound either to the benefit or the detriment of themselves or their generation. It is serious. Climate change, persons, I remember there was a president of America who said that climate change is a misnomer. I said already, it's missing us no more. It is missing us no more. So that's a misnomer for me, because it's not missing us anymore. And I know that it was a juicy idea that Barbados, what the old persons would say, that God is a Bajan. Well, God is a Bajan, a Jamaican, a Trinidadian, he's everybody. You understand? So that thing with the hurricanes missing us and what's not, I can say that it is the trajectories are not good. We are to blame because it is mankind and our anthropogenic behaviors sometimes. The behaviors, how we operate in terms of industrializing the world, is a lot of things that we are doing. We are small. Only about 2 billion people or so in the tropics contribute very small to the climate change phenomenon, but we feel the adverse effect. And that is why we must be able to take care of our immediate surroundings, do that which is important in terms of preserving our ecosystems. And as Minister of the Environment, I will probably catch a lot of fly speaking about it every single day, but I will be steadfast in my mandate to ensure that Barbados remain clean, green, and beautiful. Madam Deputy Chair, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that we do now suspend further consideration. Sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker. beg to move that we do now postpone further consideration of this bill, and that the bill be referred to the Committee on Social Sector and the Environment. This is a standing select committee. The remit of that committee, ma'am, would be to consider both the bill and the draft regulations to be made under that bill, and that they report back to Parliament within a period of 3 months or sooner.
The question is that this Honourable members, the question is that this bill be now, that further consideration be deferred of this, and that the same be deferred to the Committee of Social Sector Environment, Committee on Social Sector and Environment, and that the same report will be delivered over a period of within a 3-month period, possibly. Honourable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. Methink the ayes have it.
Madam Deputy Speaker, with that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until Tuesday, the 30th of July at 10 a.m.
The question is that this sitting be postponed, be adjourned, excuse me. The question is that this sitting be adjourned until the 30th of July, 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. Honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber is adjourned until the 30th of July.